Hello, my name is Ben,
And my name's Josh.
and welcome back to FPL Graduates, and welcome back to another video. We're off the pack of a huge double game week, some huge scores flying about. Let us know in the comments how many you got. Let's get into the transfer targets for game week 35.
Okay, so yeah, as Ben mentions, a huge double game week 34, and then we're into another double game week 35, only with two teams doubling this week. Before we get started, thank you very much for 3,000 subscribers. Huge achievement for us. That was our target by the end of the season, so thanks for your support so far. Getting into this video though, transfer targets, we've got goalkeepers and defenders on this list now. So we've got Vicario up first. I think this is quite important for wildcarders. I know Ben will sort of dive into that a little bit as well. He's a decent option if you're trying to get a bit of that Spurs defence. Obviously, their fixtures aren't the best for both the doubles. They've got City, and then in between that they've got the Liverpool fixture as well as Arsenal and Chelsea. So clean sheets, I'm not sure will be there, but save points will be. And I think Vicario, he tends to make quite a few saves. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I really like him as a pick, and the fact he's an elite shot stopper as well means that there's high potential for him to get those save points and therefore sort of move him up. So if Spurs do end up keeping a clean sheet, which in one of those games they might, because in those bigger games Spurs can on occasion keep it tight at the back. It's not happened too much this season, but they've done it before when they've sort of up against the wall against like the likes of City. They can do it. So Vicario would be higher on the bonus point system for that. So for that reason, I do really like him. I think he also rotates quite nicely with someone like potentially Onana. If you're looking at sort of having two doubling keepers going forwards into 37. So yeah, I really like him as an option, and definitely think like it's worth considering at least one of those Spurs sort of goalkeeper or defenders.
Yeah, another Spurs defender that we're discussing as well is Pedro Porro. At the time of the recording, we have no update on his fitness other than we think that he's in team training along with Richarlison. So fingers crossed he should be available. And if he is a very good asset. He's probably the best Spurs defender to go for now. Udoji's out. Obviously, he is a bit pricey at 5.9 million. So it's one of those that I think you have to sort of try and get him in rather than go for like a Van der Ven or a Romero. I just think that the attacking threat is much more there. I know Romero scored more goals than him this season, but from open play, he's a bit of a menace, isn't he, Ben?
Yeah, I think if he's fit, I think you probably should get him in as a sort of priority for this game week. I think a lot of managers will probably avoid Spurs just based on how they've been playing the last few game weeks, but we know that they can play well. We've seen it at the start of the season. They've had a bit of a lull. They've got to get themselves into gear if they want to sort of make a decent stab at Europe and that sort of thing. So Pedro Porro, with the fact he's on so many set pieces as well, is going to sort of give himself a big opportunity to get some hauls and get some points on the board. Yeah, like you said, a doggy out as well. He's the only real attacking option from that defensive perspective for the Spurs.
Yeah, and then moving on to another attacking fullback is Malo Gusto. Obviously, he wasn't featuring in Chelsea's team against Arsenal in midweek. He's picked up some form of an injury. He seems like he's been struggling with something for the last couple of weeks, and he was not in the matchday squad against Arsenal. I currently own him myself. I think what I'll do, I'll just wait for the press conferences on Friday, see if we get an update. If it sounds a bit positive, I'll probably keep him. I don't think I'd transfer him out just because there is obviously not only just the double this week, but the double in 37 as well. So it'll have to take a lot for him to leave my team. What's your thoughts on him, Ben? Obviously, you're wild carding this week, so you have sort of that flexibility. Is he in your draft right now?
Currently in my draft and awaiting an update from Pochettino on his fitness. So we'll see how he is. I think, again, it's similar to Porro. If he is fit, I'd want to have him because he is by far Chelsea's most attacking defender. And I don't really trust sort of any of the other ones. He seems to be fairly secure in his minutes when he's fit as well. And he's been playing pretty fantastically considering how badly Chelsea have been playing. Him and Palmer down that side have been really, really effective together. And he's the reason that Palmer's been playing so well. He allows sort of the overlapping run for Palmer to be able to come inside and sort of get the hauls that he does. So if he can facilitate that and get a couple of assists on the way, then I don't mind him as an asset at all.
Yeah, and then moving on to Newcastle defensive assets. Obviously, Kieran Trippier again wasn't in the squad against Crystal Palace, so I think we can sort of rule him out at the moment for probably the next couple of game weeks. We can maybe see before game week 37 at the earliest, but even then, I think he'll still be a minute's risk. Fabian Schär, obviously, he is a bit more pricey than Dan Burn, but he does provide good attacking threat. I remember his 17-point haul against Aston Villa in my team this season. He's got good numbers. I think if you've got the money, for me, Schär is definitely worth it over Dan Burn. But Dan Burn's attacking numbers have improved in recent weeks. He's still playing left back with Emil Kraft playing right centre back and Jacob Murphy playing right back at the moment. So the defence isn't great, but saying that, obviously they've kept 2 clean sheets before the Crystal Palace fixture. We're actually recording it at half time of that game and it's still 0-0, so you'll know the result of that one. What's your thoughts on this Newcastle defence at the moment?
Yeah, I mean they're performing, but I sort of with their full strength defense, they weren't performing that great. I don't think Burn or Shaw is a necessity. I think it's a nice to have, but also if you do have one of them, it's probably not going to give you the flexibility to be able to go to Trippier if you want to, just because. You're going to be. It's going to be very likely you're going to have a couple more Newcastle players that we're going to mention later on in the video, and you probably will be looking maybe not as much on those two, just in case someone like Trippier is back, or you need to move to a Newcastle midfielder that's really sort of doing well, and you need to triple up on them. So that's the only thing that I'd say is sort of like a beware of, is the fact that you could sort of end up tying yourself into having Bernal when Trippier could be back and firing. You just never know in that situation.
Yeah, obviously one of the main things with Newcastle as well is their fixtures. Sheffield United at home this week, Burnley away next week, and then that double in 37. So, yeah, unbelievable fixture side of things there. Finally on the defenders list is Van Heck. 4.1 million, cheap as chips, doubles in 37. Bournemouth away this week's not a terrible fixture if you need him to play, but this one's more targeted at the wildcard players, I guess, if they need a little cheap defender. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, really, really like him, and I think he's cheap enough for you to bench him most weeks, and you're probably realistically only going to need him for double game week 37 if you are indeed bench boosting. So that's my thought on it. Very decent price, a decent defender. Brighton's defence hasn't been the best, but it has improved massively since the start of the season. So I do anticipate a couple of clean sheets on the way before game week 38. Okay, so moving on into the midfield. And again, we're going to start off with a Spurs player. Son, I think, is going to be essential for this next run of games. With the double game week that they've got coming up next week, I think a lot of managers are going to move towards him and try and move off the likes of Salah, because at the moment, at the time recording, again, he isn't performing, and Liverpool aren't looking too great at the moment, whereas Son just has the fixtures there ready and waiting for him. I think as well, against the tougher teams, that is where he is best. He's good on the counter-attack against high-pressing teams. I think these fixtures till the end of the season are ready-made for Heung-min Son.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I think in the reverse fixtures of these upcoming run, he only blanked once, and I think he had 3 double-digit hauls in the other games. So yeah, as you mentioned, these tougher fixtures is where he thrives. I think he could even be considered a captaincy option depending on the update that we get with Cole Palmer. So it'll be interesting to see that. Obviously on penalties as well, which is a massive, massive plus. Potentially down the middle, we'll have to wait and see. I would say though, in recent weeks, he hasn't necessarily been firing on all cylinders. That's something that maybe the Spurs attack in general, to be fair, is not been necessarily the best as what we've seen maybe at the start of the season. But still, I think if you're playing this game week, you're going to need him in your team.
Absolutely. And talking of Spurs players, one who's actually shone maybe a little bit brighter than the rest of the players is Brennan Johnson. He's looked very decent off the wing for Spurs over recent game weeks, getting a lot of assist potential. Maybe the goal scoring threat, not so much there compared to someone like potentially Heung-min Son and the whole potential, because obviously he's not on any set pieces. But he's a fantastic midfield enable option for you to go for if you wanted to.
Yeah, he's averaging nearly zero point 0.8 expected goal involvement in the last 6, which is really high, like one of the highest in the league at the moment. So decent numbers from him. There's a lot of thought process between going for him this week and then maybe moving to Anthony Gordon next week. I think it is a tough decision between those two. Do you choose the 2 fixtures, albeit harder fixtures, or do you go with obviously Anthony Gordon at home to Sheffield United? Anthony Gordon's home record has been ridiculous as well. So yeah, it's a tough one. I think he is a good option though, and if you're looking for maybe that third Spurs asset and you really want to go all in on these doubles, I think he'd be my pick.
Okay, and Josh mentioned him. Anthony Gordon is someone that we are looking for this week. He's been on my wild card and locked in for a long, long while. He's a fantastic option, especially at home, where he's been simply sensational. The attacking numbers from him are incredible. Maybe not so great away from home, but the double game week coming up, fantastic fixtures that Josh pointed out earlier mean that he is 100% one of those options that you simply maybe can't even ignore.
Yeah, 100%. One thing that I would say about Gordon, though, is that he's only got three returns away from home so far this season. So obviously, definitely much better at home. Obviously, Sheffield United fixture is at home. So if you're thinking about what I just said with that Johnson move, I'd just be cautious with that because obviously the Sheffield United at home fixture is probably the prime fixture there. One of their fixtures in the double is at home against Brighton as well. So there's that as well. But yeah, for me, if I was picking between the two, I think Anthony Gordon's got to be a lock this week. A lot of managers will own him, and a lot of managers will probably avoid double game week players just to own him because this fixture is so prime for Newcastle.
United are 2-1 down.
Already?
Yeah, but...
Is it Brereton Diaz?
Yep.
Is it? I'm just watching the goal, bear with. Such a poacher. What a goal. It's got to the stage where, honestly, we dominated that first half. We got like 83% possession, and then Onana just fucking plays it to Bogle and he scores. Absolute bellend. Anyway, carry on.
All right. Next up, we have got Bruno Fernandes of Manchester United, and again, one that we're targeting for the double game week. With United sort of seemingly struggling at the tail end of the season, there could potentially be rotation, but Bruno Fernandes seems to be pretty nailed on for minutes, won't be rotated out. There's going to be, a bit of rotation between those wingers, and he's going to be the most secure in his minutes for an attacking player for United. Josh, you think it's worth bringing him in?
I think he's the best United attacker to go for. Like you say, he's nailed for minutes on penalties. In the recent weeks as well, he's been returning really, really well. Obviously against Coventry in the FA Cup would have come away with a double-digit haul. I think he only blanked in one of his last 5 Premier League appearances as well before the Sheffield United game. So yeah, I think he's definitely worth the funds because I don't think a lot of managers will be struggling for money necessarily if they are wildcarding at the moment. Obviously Salah probably won't be in most drafts at the moment either. So yeah, I think he's a good option. Is he necessarily you need him? I don't think you do, but I think, with the fixtures United have got, they sort of still need to pick up points as well. They do have stuff to play for, so I think, he would be in my wildcard draft if I was wildcard.
Okay, so finally, we've got a man who we don't think is going to be rotated too much towards the end of the season, especially with Manchester City chasing the title. It is Kevin De Bruyne. Now, I think it's probably worth having a minimum of one Manchester City midfielder, whether that be De Bruyne or Foden. I think they're the main two options that you can go for. Both are going to be fantastic assets to own before the end of the season. Josh, a double game week coming up. Some really decent fixtures as well for Manchester City. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I'm potentially bringing him in this week for Mo Salah myself. I think he could be worth it. We all know what he's like in that sort of business end of the season. What I really like about this pick as well is that Man City have nothing else to play for before the end of the season. Obviously, the FA Cup is after Game Week 38, so you're hoping. Obviously, I don't want to predict it, but Pep Roulette shouldn't be as bad as what it usually is. So, like you mentioned, Foden, De Bruyne. I think these two guys, especially with Erling Haaland, sort of not being fully fit at the moment. Obviously, he could be back soon, but will he sort of get rested a little bit maybe for Alvarez? We have to wait and see. I think De Bruyne sort of bridges that gap and allows managers to have maybe a triple City attack, whereas some wildcarders might get on their defence a little bit, which, let's be honest, this season hasn't necessarily been at the best of the likes of Arsenal and teams like that. So, yeah, I think he's a really nice differential, and if you're sort of wanting to go outside the box and on a proven player like De Bruyne, I think it's a no-brainer. Okay, so finally moving on to the forwards, and there's only a small list here because I think these are the guys that are the best basically. I wouldn't really look outside of it, not the single game week players. I'm going to just touch on Ollie Watkins to begin with, just because a lot of managers will say that he should be potentially looked at, but for me I think the fixtures for Villa are a little bit too difficult. I know he can return against anyone and he's proven that this season to be one of the best forwards in the league, But for me, I think there is more upside by choosing one of these guys as we go forward. So first up is Nicholas Jackson, and I know what you're thinking about following his performance against Arsenal, but he will get in those. We will take those chances. I'm sure of it. Eventually, I know a lot of managers who have owned him for a couple of weeks now, maybe sort of getting frustrated with him, but I would definitely be holding him if you've got him, and if you haven't, I think I'd consider bringing him in because obviously the fixtures are there. Double game week this week, double game week 37 as well. I think he will return in that time, and I think he's looked quite dangerous. In that first half against Arsenal, he looked good. It's just when he has that sort of chance, he hasn't been taking it. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I think he's producing the XG and XGI for a striker, and the underlying stats just do like look decent for him. So I do expect him to start returning. He has looked decent in parts. I mean, in parts in the Arsenal game, I know we sort of make fun of him for the easy ones that he misses, but he is creating chances for himself now. He is scoring goals as well. So you know what? I do think he's a decent option. A lot of managers maybe sort of turned off by his performance against Arsenal, and if you look at it sort of in isolation and don't look at the underlying stats, you think, okay, but look into the underlying stats, and I think you'll find a really great FPL asset there.
Yeah, one thing with Jackson is that he's getting the opportunities, and that's something that you can't really say with our next pick is Rasmus Højlund. He's blanked in his last 4 matches before the Sheffield United game. Obviously, that was after he came back from injury, after he went on that run of goal-scoring form. I think it's a combination of him not getting in the right areas as well as United not servicing him properly. So it's a differential pick for a reason. Maybe against easier opposition he might get more chances, but it's difficult to say at the moment. I currently have him in my team. Brought him in as a free transfer a couple of weeks ago. So it's a frustrating one because you know that he can finish when he gets the chances. He's just not getting those chances. So yeah, what's your thoughts between him and Jackson, Ben, at the minute?
I prefer Jackson for the sheer volume of chances that he's getting at the moment. But if you aren't going for, so if you can't sort of fit in Bruno into the midfield, because the midfield options are stacked for the game week 35 transfer targets, then I would consider it as a differential option. Again, I'm not so keen on it. Just for the fact that he isn't getting those chances, but he is nailed on, and he is playing in a United team that do doubles, so you could get round to it, and he could pick up a bit of form between 35 and 37 over the next couple of weeks, and start getting those chances. I mean, the fixtures against easier teams will breed a bit of form and will breed a bit of confidence, so we'll have to see if that happens. But for now, keep an eye on him. Let's see what he does over the next week or two.
Yeah, and then another option that you could go for, a cheaper option as well, is João Pedro. There's confirmation this week that Evan Ferguson is out for the remainder of the season, so he's only got Danny Welbeck to sort of fight for the 9 position. Obviously, he can play the 10 as well. One thing he has over these two guys that we just mentioned with Jackson and Højlund is that he is on penalties when he's on the pitch. So that's a big plus for a £5 million forward. And obviously, if him being that so cheap as well, you don't necessarily need to play him every single week. You can use him on your bench and then come to game week 37. If you are bench boosting, you can then just bench boost him there. So yeah, for me, I think he's actually a really decent option. And considering the likes of Højlund and Jackson aren't necessarily firing on all cylinders, there's not like a go-to option between those two. I think he sort of enters that conversation if he can get those minutes. So we'll see. Obviously, we're recording this before Thursday against the Man City game, so we'll see how many minutes he gets there. If he gets a start, I'd be tempted to put him in if I was wildcarding this week. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I do like him as an option. Again, a really decent enabler if you're sort of low on funds going into this. There are some really decent other options that you can go for. Obviously, if you pick in Haaland and you think he's going to be fit for next game week, then it sort of discounts your potential of going for him a little bit. But obviously, if you are going for Haaland and Salah, or Haaland and another big option, then you're going to have to make some money somewhere down the line. And if you've got sort of all these guys like Porro, Son, etc. You're going to want to go someone a little bit cheaper, and João Pedro could be someone that could sort of help you enable that.
Yeah, then our final forward pick is a must-have, in my opinion, on this wild card. It is Alexander Isak. Obviously, Callum Wilson is back in full-team training, so that might put you off a little bit, but I just can't see Callum Wilson starting a game ahead of Isak at the moment. One, because of the form that Isak's in, and two, because he's only just come back from quite a lengthy injury, and that I don't think Eddie Howe will risk him now, and sort of give him that full sort of summer to sort of recuperate and go again for next season. Isak himself, just unreal pick on penalties, just so good, with some great fixtures as well coming up for Newcastle United. It's going to be an interesting one to see. He could become potentially a captaincy option come that double in Game Week 37. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I think he could genuinely become a captaincy option in 37. I also think he won't get dropped in the run-in. He's going for that golden boot. There's no way that he's going to be dropped for that unless he's got some form of injury. So I definitely have Alexander Isak, in my opinion, an essential pick to have from Game Week 35 onwards.
That wraps up our Game Week 35 transfer targets. Let us know who you're targeting in the comments down below.
And of course, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the FPL Graduates YouTube channel. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
later. Have a good game week, everyone.
You may rise, but you'll never make me wanna stick around you.